One of the things that I wanted to bring to our attention is, look at this, Jupiter North Node is in alignment with where Uranus was at the time, okay? So again, there's that Mercury, there's that North Node, there's that Jupiter. It's all in alignment with that Uranus at the time. So this is a really, really big deal in the sense that whatever was sort of allowed to come into the collective psyche as a seed of development, you're watching today the activation, a key activation point in this seeding. That's what I'm pointing out here, okay? Hey everybody, welcome to Raising Vibrations. And in this video, I want to talk to you about Jupiter and Saturn. And in particular, I want to show you the planetary pair relationship that these two planets have. I'm going to do this with the aspects and phases cycles that you see in evolutionary astrology. And I want to show you how this ties into the current astrological climate, where we've got this hot topic of Jupiter entering Taurus, Jupiter aligning with the North Node, and of course the big T-square that's taking place between Pluto and the nodal axis. So that's kind of the framework of today's conversation. And I'm really excited for this because I think that this is some good information that I feel once we really digest and we become aware of, it will help us make more sort of sense about, you know, what is occurring for us individually as well as the collective. This is a big deal. Okay, now it was brought to my attention through somebody that had written in the comment section on one of the videos that Pluto is currently at the same location that the Great Conjunction took place between Jupiter and Saturn. Do you all remember on the 21st of December 2020, we had this great conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn, and we all went outside, we looked out the sky and we saw these two planetary luminaries there. Well, like I said, Pluto is now at this point. And so my natural kind of astrological investigation was piqued, and I went to explore this, and I found some actually pretty interesting information, and it's helped me better understand the kind of cycles that are present with us right now, and what is gestating within us, and then what also that seed was about, right? So the seed of the Great Conjunction, how it's gestating and how it's kind of materializing at the moment. Now, two things. If you haven't watched that Great Conjunction video, I'm going to put a link in the description for you to go and check out, and I'll also remind you at the end of the video. And also, if you have not watched the Jupiter conjunct the North Node video that I recently put out, where I talk about the squares and stuff, then I highly encourage you to do that too, okay? Because both of those videos will actually make this video even more impactful in many ways, because now you've got a lot of context to what I'm talking about, all right? So I'll talk about that at the end of the video too. So I think what we should do is take a look at the Great Conjunction, and then from there, I'm going to take us through a little bit of a journey and explain what I mean by the Great Conjunction, the planetary pairs, the aspects, and where we are today. So let's do that. All right, so we are looking at the current map where the inner circle, so this inner circle that you're looking at right now, is the 21st of December 2020. Okay, sorry, yeah, 2020. And the outer circle is where the planets are today, okay? So the outer circle tells us where the planets are today, and the inner circle tells us where the planets were in December with the Great Conjunction. So here you can see Jupiter and Saturn are in 0 degrees of Aquarius, and here you see Pluto currently at the 0 degree mark, okay? Now, this is a significant thing because if you look, when this Great Conjunction took place, okay, the planetary relationship between Saturn and Jupiter was formed, as in like there was a new direction that was aligning itself. So when a conjunction takes place, think of it like this. There is a new pattern of energy that has been seeded into our awareness. Okay, that's what a conjunction means. There's a new pattern that is being seeded into our awareness. And then as you go, as the planets move along, so if I do this and I say, look, that's where Saturn is today at 6 degrees of Pisces. There's where Jupiter is, 2 degrees of Taurus. You notice how they have separated from each other now? That relationship between those two there, that tells us how that seed is maturing. So that's what we're studying here, okay? When you're looking at phases, we're studying the development of an original sort of set of instructions or insights that percolate and develop within our consciousness, okay? So here we have this great conjunction taking place, and then, as we said, there's that Pluto placement. Now, in your mind, I want you to do this. I want you to look at this placement of Pluto. Notice how it's forming that square there, right? That's why I was saying go watch that other video. And you can see that square, right? This Pluto is essentially deeply, deeply bringing this conjunction alive and awake into the collective. Okay, that's what I'm trying to put across here. That's why I see this as really, really significant. This Pluto, the themes that this Pluto is bringing us to right now are awakening the seed of liberation here. So each and every one of us individually at this point, okay, was going through something. And during 2020, the collective was going through something, right? We know what we were going through. This Pluto is now bringing this conjunction to our awareness in a very transformative way. So that's the first layer, that this pattern over here, this Pluto is actualizing this. But the square, again, Pluto squaring the north and south node, signifies that there is a dynamic tension between moving forward with this energy and the need to eliminate any pre-existing patterns that are from the past. Okay, so that's why that's what this Pluto square is about. It's telling us if you want to actualize this thing here, then you need to process and let go of previous attachments to that. And individually and collectively we're moving through that process. So that's the first thing. This Pluto is awakening and activating this. Okay, so this Saturn-Jupiter square, Saturn-Jupiter conjunction is very, very alive within the collective, and we are watching this conjunction start to take shape within our collective. Okay, now I wrote it down in my notes over here. One of the things that I wanted to bring to our attention is, look at this. Jupiter North Node is in alignment with where Uranus was at the time. Okay, so again, there's that Mercury, there's that North Node, there's that Jupiter. It's all in alignment with that Uranus at the time. So this is a really, really big deal, in the sense that whatever was sort of allowed to come into the collective psyche as a seed of development, you're watching today the activation, a key activation point in this seeding. That's what I'm pointing out here, okay? So that's the first thing. Now, if we take a look at this here, I want to show you this. Saturn at 0 degrees, and there you can see, look at those squares that are happening to Saturn, to Uranus. So during 2020, Saturn and Uranus were forming a last quarter square to each other. In fact, this is a disseminating square. So in evolutionary astrology, we work with what is called aspects and phases, and I'm going to show you a picture of what that looks like. Okay, can you see it on the screen right now? Okay, so that is a picture of aspects and phases, and I want you to look at the top of the chart there. Do you see the word disseminating phase? And you notice also right at that 12 o'clock position, it's red, right? And it says 270, okay? Now this aspect between Saturn and Jupiter and Uranus, they are forming right at the top that disseminating square, okay? And then eventually over the next like 6 or 7 months, that will form into a last quarter square. What that means for us, okay, let me put me back on. What that means for us is that these three planets, particularly Saturn and Uranus, these planets are creating the tension to say there is a culmination or ending, as in there is a desire to break out of certain like societal structures and molds that we have been living, right? Certain collective myths or truths that we now are recognizing are becoming outdated or we don't want to align with anymore. There are certain patterns of established structure that are breaking down. That's what that phase relationship does. And when you look at the actual conjunction itself, it houses this energy in it. So what I'm trying to show you here is that this moment, this great conjunction that happened in 2020 in December, It houses this very disruptive, this very sort of potent energy to want to break down and break out of pre-existing molds of structures and patterns, right? That's what it wants to do. So it's like, if we as a society consistently thought that, money was the be all and end all of everything, this pattern would come along and say, well, is that true? Is that still what we agree? Or during 2020, 2019, and 2020 and 2021, people felt a very deep shift internally around their values, because they were starting to experience, as we know with COVID, a lot of different dynamics. Everybody experienced that space differently, but collectively there was very much a tension between freedom and control. Freedom and control were the kind of dynamics that were taking place there. Well, that conjunction was causing a tremendous amount of pressure within our psyche to form the need for breaking down dynamics. And there were many examples during 2021 of how this pattern was emerging within the collective. And there was this constant relationship between establishing and putting down more structure to control the chaos, and more desire for chaos to emerge and more chaos to emerge, okay? And I would probably argue that this conjunction over here has accelerated a tremendous amount of social and collective unrest, as well as the anxiety that we live with today, because there are tremendous amounts of new stresses in our environment, right, regarding life. We realized the tremendous amount that governmental structures and governmental officials were actually just people that were also lost. We recognized that, as much as we wanted to give our sense of authority to external people to say, hey, please run the show for us, a lot of people realized that those people were just as incompetent in that sense. And there was a lot of social realization of distrust within the collective. And at the same time, there was also the emergence of a tremendous amount of fear that came around the need to put in structures and to protect, right? And this kind of binary was taking place over there. So both of these patterns were very, very clear. And like I said, if you go and watch that Jupiter-Saturn conjunction video, you'll see how I address this kind of splitting that was going to occur. And you can see that in the world right now. This pattern has become very, very powerful. And now, today, right, today where we're living today, you can see how the dust has settled to a certain degree, but we're still living with the echoing experience of the last 2.5 years within our collective psyche, right? And we're busy trying to make sense of what it was really about, and how do we live our lives, and how do we move forward relative to these very sudden and very accelerated experiences that have brought us out of our feelings of safety and security. Like, for a lot of you, for a lot of us, for a lot of people, that period of time brought a feeling of living outside of what was familiar. And when a lot of people fear unfamiliarity and what is foreign, there's a tremendous amount of need to control that, or create even more structure. And then there's also this dynamic relationship to want to embrace the new, right? And these two patterns are very palpable. I bet you can actually feel that as you're kind of listening to this video and you reflect back on that time. So this conjunction over here, along with that square between Uranus and Jupiter and Saturn, like that energy is still echoing and vibrating in the peripheral visions, okay, that within the collective at this stage. Now, the reason why I brought it in play is because this pattern, if you look at the transits right now, right, Uranus is now sitting at 19 degrees. There is no T-square between Saturn, or there's no square between Saturn and Uranus at this stage. There's no square between Saturn and Jupiter. So that pattern is kind of dissipated. And like I said, it's still echoing in the background. But what I think and feel is very clear to me is that the current relationship between Saturn and Jupiter at this point, along with the North Node, this energy here, where we are today, as well as the Pluto square, is we are now at a point cyclically where this square between Jupiter, Uranus, that one there, is now being kind of like integrated. So think of it as like a huge awakening, a set of like massive awakening and stresses into the collective psyche. And it comes in and we're like, whoa, we're trying to process this, it's super intense. And then the dust settles and we're now in the aftermath of this process looking like, whoa, how do we deal with this, right? And the effects of that transit, effects of 2020, we are now living, like I said, at a point of integration. We're like in that place of the dust is settled, now what do we do? And this pattern over here, if you see this Jupiter-Saturn pattern, it's reached what is called a crescent phase relationship. You can see here, evolutionary astrology phases and correlations, and you can see crescent phase there. It's a Taurus archetype, right? And you can see it's an internalization and or new phase, it's a withdrawal, and this is a place now where we are becoming, where we're like bringing our energy inwards. So there's a very deep contemplative and reflective space right now between the Saturn and Jupiter pattern. Okay, it's a withdrawing phase. So Jupiter Saturn, new phase energy. Okay, let me just flick back to the pattern of the chart. There's the new phase energy. And then when we look at where Jupiter and Saturn is today, right, it's in now this crescent phase energy. So there's the crescent phase there. So again, we are now looking at, let's go back to the chart. We are now looking at the development of Saturn and Jupiter and how it correlates to the current phase of this north node that you see here, right? You see that north node there and how it's aligning with that north node, Jupiter north node. So we are now at this point where we are learning to integrate the experiences that we've went through during 2020, and we are learning to integrate those things. And part of that integration phase is looking at what we want to bring with us to the future. What did that new phase conjunction do for us? So reflect all the way back to 2020, okay, December. What was going on in your life for that period of time? Let's say about like 5 months, 6 month period. Okay, what was changing for you? Now, if you fast forward to today, what we are currently all doing collectively is beginning to solidify, integrate, and reflect on those values that we received, right? Those insights. We want to now ask ourselves, okay, so let me just go back to my screen over here. What insights did we receive during that period of time? What changed for us during that period of time? And what are we now learning to bring into our field and kind of reflect deeply on, solidify within our lives? Because this phasal relationship is now going to continue within the next like year and a half. And we will take a lot of what was going on in our lives over the last 3 years, and it will start to become and form real anchored experiences in our reality. In other words, we are all moving in an evolutionary direction, and that first initial conjunction, right, December 20, that energy over here has brought a new like world to you. And now we're at that point where we're saying, okay, what's the value of this new world? I'm gathering some information. I'm learning what's important for me, what is not. And simultaneously, you're also asking yourself, what am I ready to let go of? This is this Pluto square that is part of that old world, okay? So again, if you go back and watch the Jupiter video that I talked about, I go deeply into the feeling of limitation that is relative to the Pluto square and the need to go beyond the horizons of your own limitations to experience freedom. And that freedom will deeply align with the experiences that 2020 brought you with that conjunction. Does that make sense? Okay. So the 2020 conjunction was the seed. We experienced a bunch of new like developments within our consciousness, within our psyche individually. And then we are now at the point here where we are now looking to say, hey, this is what I want, this is what I align with, this is what I don't align with, this is what I align with, this is what I don't align with. And eventually, within the next 2 years, you will start to see the kind of concretization and the really anchoring in of the decisions that you are making now, as well as the sparks of interest and curiosity and experiences that you had initially during the early stages of 2020 or 2021, right? Because for those of you that live in the States, what happened in the beginning stages of 2021, right? You can see that that's how that energy manifested, right? There was an eruption relative to political dynamics that were taking place. It has set the course for how the West, particularly in the States, is manifesting itself, right? As well as if you think about what's taking place in Europe at the moment, this phasal relationship between Saturn and Pluto is very, very significant. Now, there's a lot of information that I just threw at you right now, okay? So again, I do apologize for that, but I hope that has brought you the kind of context of what the energy is rolling through us like, okay? Now, the one thing that I want to talk to as well is what is an actual planetary pair? Okay, what does the planetary pair between Saturn and Jupiter really reflect? And if you want to go ahead and look at this in your natal chart, right, in your actual natal chart, this is how I'm going to try and put this across to you, okay? I'm going to attempt to do this. It's kind of a little bit complicated, but I'm going to attempt to do it. It's what I actually teach in the astrology schools that I'm running, as well as the upcoming one that's going to be released super soon too. So be on the lookout for that one. When you look at the Jupiter function in your natal chart, okay, you're looking at how you personally experience reality and then form a world map, a map of how you experience reality, okay? That's what Jupiter represents within your chart. It's the mechanism that shows you how you develop and experience your worldview. So if people, you know, are unable to experience, well, yeah, how do I do this? Yeah, if people are unable to develop their own experiences and form their own ideas about what the world is relative to reading, relative to conversations, then ideologies become the roadmap and the worldview that people adopt. So that's why, you know, you can easily indoctrinate somebody with ideologies of a certain perspective when somebody feels an absence of truth within themselves. And this is actually something that is very, very alive right now in the collective, okay? Because we're kind of like moving through this huge collective shift around what is actually meaningful and real for us as a human race. And we're kind of in this liminal space between, hey, this doesn't make sense anymore, it feels outdated, but we don't know what the future is. We're just kind of like following in the dark, a very kairos kind of experience of I'm living in the moment, just being real with what's alive in my life right now. Like that space of the absence of structure and a form definition within a society, like what are the rules, and we're kind of in that space where it's being morphed and developed at this stage. It's very easy for a lot of people to find their sense of self within a collective ideology. So this pattern at the moment also reflects the development of your individual perspective of life that is very new. Okay, that's how it's working for you at this point in time. So over the last 2 years, a new set of structures and in pieces of information have been informing your worldview that is now allowing you to say, okay, well, this is how I see it. I once saw it like this, but a series of very disruptive experiences over the last 2 years has sort of disenchanted me from certain perspectives that I've had, as well as also brought you a completely new set of parameters of thinking that now you go, actually, this makes a lot more sense to me, or this feels like the truth that I want to align with, as an example. There's like a very clear shift internally within people at the moment. So Jupiter reflects the ability to be able to develop that, okay? So you have it internally, but then you also have a society or a culture that will define the context of a reality, okay? That's the Jupiter mechanism. Then you have Saturn, okay, that refers to and reflects how you define that sense of truth for yourself. So what are the governing principles and the states of integrity that you have within yourself that you use and say, this is what's out of integrity for me, this is what's integrity for me, right? What's the internal scaffolding and structure that you have that allows you to actualize those truths? So if you're somebody that sort of, you know, defines reality through a very spiritual lens, then everything that kind of has this tone of spirituality to it will become part of your worldview and you'll see it through this lens. If you're somebody that's more sort of Darwinian in nature and you subscribe more to a very deep physical, practical, biological way of how life works, then you will define that through that lens and you will create a definition through that. This is one of the reasons why in the collective right now, it's very easy to go out and have conversations with a wide scape of people and notice that it's super easy to get into a conflict, like really, really easy. You can easily just, say something, define a truth, and it immediately attracts a kind of like counter perspective to that. And we're living in a world right now with this kind of conjunction of how we're actually trying to make sense of those that we actually align with, that feel resonant, and those that are in a different kind of fractal. In other words, a different pattern of definition and philosophical truth, right? That's kind of what's emerging right now. And you'll see that. You'll align more with people that go, hey, this is what I'm seeing, perceiving, and making sense of the world. And those that are in contradiction to that or in misalignment with that, you're kind of less likely to engage within. And this is happening for us, right? This is how we're individually manifesting our own truths. Now, if you want to take this one step further and you want to go have a look at the phasal relationship between your Jupiter and your Saturn in your astrology chart, right? So let's say, for instance, like mine, right? My Jupiter is in Sagittarius and my natal Saturn is in Scorpio. So I've got this kind of energy over here, this new phase energy that's existing between Saturn and Jupiter in my chart. This current transit that's experiencing right now, this current Saturn in Pisces and the current Jupiter in Taurus, that Saturn-Jupiter is naturally showing me where my current natal Jupiter and Saturns are actually evolving, right? So I will experience this phasal, this Jupiter Saturn alignment, this planetary pair, differently to somebody else. And if you go ahead and you go and look at your astrology chart and you look at where Saturn is currently, as well as where Jupiter is currently, so whatever house Saturn is in, for me it's in my second house, Jupiter is in my fourth house, yeah? It's very evident and clear to me that there's a huge shift going on around what I align with regarding the way that I communicate astrology. In the past, I've really defined it a certain way, but now this current Jupiter-Saturn aspect is really activating, for me, a complete shift in the way that I wish to express and do astrology. It's percolating within myself. But at the moment, right now for me, remember, I talked about Jupiter, Saturn currently in what is called a crescent phase, so it's a very kind of withdrawal, reflective thing. So for me, I'm deeply looking at how can I do this astrology in a way that aligns with what happened to me during 2020, which was I was going through a huge process of recognizing the importance of emotional work, right? And how we can have agency, how we can take charge of our astrology. So for me, I can really see how this pattern is materializing within our life. I think it can be a little bit more sort of confusing and complex for those of you that are pretty new to astrology, and I wish I could help in that sense. But what I am saying to you here is take a look at your natal Saturn, take a look at your natal Jupiter, whichever house those are in. Then I would look at where Saturn is currently, and I would take a look at where Jupiter is currently. And what you can go ahead and do is try to see how the karma of your Saturn and your Jupiter is currently being evolved by the current location of Jupiter and Saturn in your chart. Okay? And again, like there's lots of resources that you can probably find on the internet that will help you do that. Okay, so let me recap what I was talking about in today's video. Jupiter and Saturn as a planetary pair correlate to the way that me and you and our society will establish our sense of philosophy and truth in the world. And for a collective, it's actually how we shape our economical structure. Right? Did you know this? Is that whenever there's a new phase conjunction, there's an emergent pattern that starts to reshape the way that we actually establish and define an economic structure within our world. And you can think about this, right? Let's go back to 2020 and think about what things were changing economically for us, right? There's a lot of economic crisis. There's a lot of change, like inflation, like we're living in the context of inflation at the moment. And think about how that, what sort of, in a sense, impacted that, right? During that COVID period of time, there's a tremendous amount of people that were off. The kind of structure of society and the pressure of society became more intense because a lot of the jobs and the working system collapsed because a lot of it was kind of wiped out because everybody was not working in the same context they were before. We're now living relative to that phasal, that original conjunction. And now we're in this place where we're trying to make sense of a new world. And there are many different things that are emerging in the world right now. And we're coping and dealing with it. So currently at the moment, right, this Jupiter-Saturn transit is really reflecting to us how we as a society are trying to organize ourselves and develop new ways in which the way that our financial structure and economic structure works. That's very fascinating. So the planetary pair between Jupiter-Saturn being very important. It also directly correlates to that when this great conjunction took place between Jupiter and Saturn, there was a seed for something new to come into the world, right? There was a huge disruption that came in, but new emergent patterns were coming out at the same time. We are now, currently today, living in the time where we are trying to make sense of that period of time. We're trying to process that. We're trying to reorganize ourselves in a completely new way, which is also something that can be very confusing at this stage. But what is really alive and real for us right now is if you are aligned with that new phase conjunction, you are ready to break out of pre-existing patterns. Okay, and today with that Pluto square, we're working through final attachments that keep us stuck in those belief systems and definitions that are still keeping you restricted. Okay, so that's the piece, that's the kind of nugget of this video over here. And it all started there in December 2020. Okay. All right, guys. Well, I hope that you found value in this. Obviously, watch it over and over. Make sure to take your astrology chart and kind of map it on your own. And like I said, there are 2 videos that are going to come on the screen right now. And one correlates to the Great Conjunction and the other one correlates to the Jupiter North Node alignment. So enjoy that.